Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul, joined by Jack Weinberger and Robert Ziggy Ziegler for a Lions-Packers Week 14 preview, Thursday Night Football. A big one in Detroit. Jack is back after his hiatus. A lot of people saying that Jack fled the show for a couple days after the Thanksgiving massacre.
Well, can I say
Wisconsin.
a couple things?
Oh, please.
So I haven't been here the last couple shows, and I will say I'm sorry for that was a bad pick. I picked the Dolphins. They got crushed. And I will say my apologies. That was a good win for Green Bay, double-digit victory. I was not here because it's not a matter of not wanting to face the music or accept my L. I accepted my L, but I was actually out with that 7-Eleven girl coming up from Miami. So I couldn't make the show, but now I'm back, and you guys might be able to take down my Dolphins, but there ain't no way you're taking down my Lions in Detroit this week. There's no way.
Were you in a gas station
Thursday
parking
night.
lot and saw a girl in a Lions jersey?
Hell yeah. No. So the girl I was out with, the Dolphins girl,
That went well.
she went great. And then she looked over me and she goes, I hate the Packers. Lions are going to crush them. I'm like, yeah, you're right. They are, aren't they? So now I'm all here. I'm all Lions, baby.
About to get wiped up.
One pride. If the Lions win, I give her a ring.
Yeah, who could have seen the Packers beating the Dolphins in frigid Lambeau Field, where Tua is 0-8 now in cold weather games? Who could have seen it coming?
I met a girl.
Met a girl. Yeah. What's the line from Good Will Hunting? Something about a girl.
Something about a girl
for Jack. That's the note we had just lying here on the bar downstairs before he missed the show. Something about a girl, guys. I'll be back.
They won the battle. They're not winning the war. They're not winning the war.
Isn't this crazy, Ziggy, how we've gotten to this point on this show where Jack is now the anti-Packers guy on the show, and we're like, no, they're actually pretty good. Like let's give them their flowers.
Just watch what happens in Detroit.
I feel like we've had a lot of people lately coming out there like, oh, these guys, we can tell they're faking it now. Like this is what the show has always been. It's us saying, yeah, the Packers are really good, and here's why.
You know what the Friday morning headline's going to say? The Detroit Massacre.
Detroit Massacre.
Yeah.
Hey, I never have a problem with the Packers getting crushed. It's just it doesn't happen very often, and then usually we're here eating our own words. But this one's good. This one's a real big one. We were talking about the biggest games of Week 14, and probably Seattle and Arizona will take the cake on this one just because of the division implications and straight up getting in or not getting into the playoffs. But as far as every other game goes, Green Bay and Detroit will have a lot of impact on what the rest of this season looks like from the seeding standpoint in the NFC, where you have the Lions at that top overall spot with their ridiculous 11-1 record. The Vikings at 10-2, the Packers at 9-3. It feels like in this situation to me, and Ziggy, let me know if you're feeling similarly. The Lions still have Buffalo. They still have Chicago. They still have San Francisco. Two of those, the Bears and 49ers games on the road. This feels like a real opportunity for Detroit to pick up a loss with the way the Packers are playing. And if they win this one, Detroit, I'm really looking at that Buffalo game as the last spot where I'm confidently like, okay, this team has a shot. How do you feel in that regard?
I mean, I'm not willing to entirely discount the Minnesota Vikings heading to Detroit. I think there's a possibility.
Sorry. I'm not disregarding the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings need to. They don't own the tiebreaker with Detroit. So I should have clarified that. So they need Detroit to lose one more game before they play them to have a division chance.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Heading to San Francisco, who knows? Heading to Chicago, they've been frisky. But I think this is going to be the hardest spot for the Lions for the rest of the season, actually. I was going to say, I don't want to totally discount Minnesota, but I think this is the hardest game left on the schedule for the Lions. Buffalo going in, obviously Josh Allen is very, very good. But this season, there's just been something different about these NFC North games. And nobody has really, with the exception of the Lions and the Buccaneers at the very start of the season, nobody's challenged the Lions like the Packers and like the Vikings have. The Packers, I know you can say the Lions won, it was a blowout, whatever, but that's the worst the offense has looked basically all season. You'd have to go back to the first couple of weeks to see a team bottling up Detroit the way the Packers were able to. Obviously, the Lions won that game off a great defense performance and were able to get it done. But this Packers team, we've talked about it the past few weeks. It feels like they might be starting to get hot. Minnesota has had some struggles the past few weeks. The Packers are coming off 3 really good games. They gutted it out in Chicago, a team that's been a lot better than maybe we thought going into that game. And they've dominated the 49ers and the Dolphins at home. Jordan Love is finally starting to look like himself, and the Packers are playing complete games of football. I think this is the toughest game left on Detroit's schedule. So I agree with you. If they lose this, the division feels like it opens up again. If they win this, Lions are going to be minus 2,000 to win the division. It's locked up.
Even though they're one game, it's crazy. Yeah.
The Lions should already be minus 2K because there's no way they're going to lose this game. But I will say, the first time these two teams played, people go back and say, oh, Detroit had their way, blah, blah. Jordan Love was injured, and he's gotten a lot better. This is his time of year now where he starts to turn things up. These last 2 games, he's been awesome. Looks a lot healthier. But for me, though, it's Detroit. Detroit's only turned the ball over 6 out of 12 games. When they don't turn it over, they're averaging 40 points a game. The last 3 games, Goff has 6 touchdowns, no picks. This team, for the most part, knows how to take care of the ball, and they can score at will. I like the Zadarius Smith revenge angle factor too. The old Packer playing well for Detroit now. I just think this team is too much. Green Bay, probably the second or third best team in the NFC, but they're not even close in my eyes to the Lions, especially on the road in prime time now too. I got the Lions big. In this game.
Yeah, we've talked about in the reaction to the Dolphins and the Packers game on Thanksgiving how Jordan Love has come out of the bye week 3 weeks ago, and his pass rating's been 113, 108, 129. Like, he has been 5 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's been awesome in all these games, even though the Bears game it came down to that blocked field goal at the end. Jordan Love played well in that. It was just a couple failures in the red zone. And the bad turnover, that was the 1 interception against Chicago in the red zone that made that game closer than it maybe should have been. But the Bears, 49ers, Dolphins games, he's played really well in all of them. And remember last year, around this time, it was actually Thanksgiving Day as well, when the Packers went into Detroit and what they did in that building last year. Regardless of what our Lions friends, like Tom Monroe, may say, that game was a Packer blowout. I'm just looking back, and my initial take on this game is I'm actually rooting for the Packers again, like the 3rd time this year, which is uncomfortable. I don't like it. But when it comes down to this division race, we need Detroit to lose. The Packers and Vikings are on the same side here. We need the Lions to lose a game, and I don't feel great about it. I think Green Bay can contend with Detroit as well as anyone in the league. I really think they match up with them nicely. But if you go back to that first game, like you said, Jack, Jordan Love was hurt, so I'm not pulling too much from that. But the Detroit offense versus the Packer defense in that one, and Detroit was up 17-3 at half in that, and never really got too close from then on out. But one thing I'm circling, Jair Alexander, need him in this game. I know he was out against the Dolphins. People were a little worried what Tua might do. They shut them down. They need Jair Alexander in this game against Detroit because, as you said, Jared Goff has been playing really good football.
I mean, even with Jair, they have no chance. But I do believe, and I'm going to have to fact check this, the Lions have only lost the turnover battle like twice this year.
Well, yeah, that's what we said this a couple weeks ago, is when you play the Lions, you can't make mistakes because they don't really make many.
Yeah, like their defense has like 20 takeaways, and they've lost the TO battle, I believe, just twice. And one was a game that they won.
They've lost it, or they've won the battle 5 times. They've lost it twice, and they've been in the middle for the other games.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like this team, like they play way too clean, especially now at home in prime time. Chance to really lock up the division for the most part. I don't see Detroit losing.
Could we
game.
say though that the Lions are coming off, possibly their worst half, other than the Tampa game, their worst half of football of the season against Chicago? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, but to me that just goes back to a team who doesn't usually turned it over in a big spot. Like it was 16-0, Gibbs fumble going into the end zone. Like if that's 23-0, forget it.
Still, still from then on, like Chicago probably should have at the very least tied that football game.
I think the Lions fell asleep and took them lightly.
Okay, so you don't think there's anything?
I don't think it's a cause for concern. No.
You agree, Ziggy?
I think here is the thing that Chicago was able to do that the Packers should be looking to repeat. The one thing the Bears were able to do against the Lions reasonably well, particularly in that second half, was they were able to limit some of the production from the running backs. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs and his handful of touches was explosive, but David Montgomery had for him a pedestrian day, 21 carries on 88 yards. And the Packers, as we've seen over the past few weeks, have one of the best run defenses in the NFL. The Lions, the way their offense operates, they have explosive runs and efficient passes. That's not to say take anything away from Jared Goff, but the way this team usually works, they're not usually completing 40-yard bombs downfield like Jordan Love does. They've got huge runs and then follow that up with an efficient passing game. The only way I can see to beat this Lions team is to have a great run defense that's able to take away some of the explosion that Detroit's running backs can generate, and then to be able to limit their gains in the passing game, force a couple key incompletions to shut down the efficiency there, and then have an offense that can match. That's the only formula I can see for beating Detroit. Now, obviously, that's very hard, right? That involves shutting down Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. That involves being able to take guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, who managed to recover for one of his better games of the season last week, and make them just force incompletions at key moments. It involves being able to get pressure on Jared Goff, one of the hardest things to do with this Detroit Lions offensive line. And it requires your offense to be able to handle what Detroit can do. There's a lot you need to do, right? But if you were to think of teams that are actually able to accomplish that, there's only a handful of them in the NFL, and I think the Packers are one of them. So I understand why the Lions open this big favorites, but I can also see why that line is starting to shrink and why Vegas is starting to think maybe the Packers will be in this a little bit more than we thought. The Packers have all of the pieces. The question is, and this has been the question for them all season long, can they play a complete game of football? If they can, they'll have a chance. If anything, the offense, the defense, the special teams fall shorts, the Lions are going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I thought that one of the key things was early on in that game, and it's just funny to me. You're going over how to beat the Lions, and you go on for like a minute with all these. It's a hard team to beat. A hard team to beat.
They're unbeatable. They're unbeatable.
They're not unbeatable.
They're unbeatable.
Caleb Williams and the Bears, who you've been made fun of the entire season, had them
did they
down
beat
to the
them?
wire. No, they did.
No, they did. They're unbeatable.
Careful though. If you want to go there, we could get into Vikings arguments, Chiefs arguments. Winning matters. I agree, but we do look at the way it happens, and no, you're right. Detroit did have the huge fumble.
The Chiefs have been beaten. Who beat the Chiefs?
They lost once to the Bills.
Yeah, they got murdered.
Yeah,
but
they're still 11-1.
Yeah, they stink though.
Okay. Of all the things you said, Ziggy, I think the most important thing to slowing down Detroit is the run game. And in the second half against Chicago, I think I texted you guys during the Thanksgiving game. Gibbs and Montgomery hit their overs for the game in like the first half. I think they were both over 50 yards in the first half. And the second half, that Bears defense locked in after the opening drive touchdown from Detroit of the second half. Went punt, 4 plays, punt, 5 plays, missed field goal, but 5 plays, 24 yards, and 3 plays, 3 and out for Detroit. So the offense kind of sputtered out to end that game, and the Chicago offense had 9-play touchdown drive, 8-play touchdown drive, 3 and out, 8-play touchdown drive, then that 12-play end of game, whatever you want to call it, turnover on downs, whatever. So that it was a second half where Detroit opened up well, but then Chicago dominated most of it. And I think that against Green Bay, they will make you pay. The offense is good enough. They'll be there the entire game. Chicago's offense was pretty horrible in the first half. So I'm looking at this one where I expect Detroit to come out and win a close one, a fun one. I mean, these are two of the most fun teams to watch in the NFL. I just think Detroit across the board is better than the Packers. The one thing that I'm circling, though, is all the injuries piling up on the defensive line. They are continuing. That's continuing to be a problem. Aiden Hutchinson's the big name that everyone talks about. But Marcus Davenport is out for the year. I mean, you're watching the Thanksgiving Day game, and I feel like 3 other guys, right, went down for Detroit on that line.
I got Darius Smith.
I mean, he was hurt at one point. It was in that game. So you can take so much. And the defense, I think all the credit in the world goes to the Detroit defense this year for how well they've played, given the newcomers, given the injuries. But there comes a point in time where you can only take so much, so many injuries across a defense, particularly on the D line, when you're having to get after Jordan Love, and now healthy Jordan Love, where if the Packers are winning that battle up front, their offense can match Detroit. And that's what I want to see. Is Detroit going to be able to get to Jordan Love and maybe have him make some of the mistakes he's been making most of this year? Because if he has a clean pocket, we're probably in for a shootout, and then it's anyone's game.
Love's going to make his mistakes. This is going to be.
He hasn't lately.
This is going to be a great atmosphere. It's not a home game in Lambeau. He'll make his mistakes. To me, all this was in Chicago is Lions were killing them. Went to the locker room. They're like, all right, this team stinks. Looking forward to Thanksgiving dinner later that night. Took their foot off the gas. We got Green Bay coming in next week. I believe we're getting this line at 3.5 because of what the Packers did, blowing out a bunch of backups in San Francisco and then blowing out the Dolphins and the Lions barely beating the Bears. I mean, I'm better than Vegas. I'd set this line at 6.5 or 7.5. I think the Lions do cover that. So to get them at 3.5 is a real gift. And my piece
I would just say this.
My piece of advice is hop on that right now.
I know you said Jordan Love will make his mistakes, and I know Jared Goff has played perfectly the last 3 weeks, but Jared Goff has the occasional meltdown game every year. I mean, we saw that against the Texans, right? I'll tell you this, against the Packers, you will not be able to get away with throwing 5 interceptions. I think it's very unlikely the Lions will win the game if that happens.
Yeah.
So Jared Goff, he's usually excellent, but we know this. Occasionally he has the meltdown game where he really struggles. Things just aren't clicking on offense and it becomes a disaster. Jeff Hafley, is going to be doing his best to make that happen. And again, like if you look at defenses that are capable of doing that to quarterbacks, I think the Packers are one of the better candidates. So I'm not counting them out of this game whatsoever. I think they've got more than most teams in the NFL a chance to win. And let's not forget, I don't know if you've heard how Tucker Kraft has been talking. This Packers team is fired up. He says that he wants to get his hands on Kirby Joseph because of how the Lions have been playing. And that he wants to, he said, if I get a chance to get my hands on him, I'm going to be playing football, which means I'm going to try and murder this guy on the field. So I don't know. It's Kirby Joseph has a history of taking out tight ends. I don't know if you remember from last year, Paul. He took out 2 tight ends basically in a row, put them on IR for the season. But I can definitely see the Packers going in and doing this. They've had this game circled. They're really hot. This is the time, if you're Green Bay, to show that you can compete with the big boys and have a chance to win a Super Bowl. They've got to get it done this week, or I'm just downgrading them to frisky playoff contender for the rest of the year.
Yeah, if they go into Detroit and win, everything changes. The whole narrative around the Packers change. Like it becomes Super Bowl or bust. And it's pretty funny from where we were a few weeks ago. People super concerned about Jordan Love. If they win this one, 4 straight out of the bye, and I mean the sky would be the limit. I think we're gonna know early what kind of a game we're gonna get. Detroit typically does not let their foot off the gas the way they did on Thanksgiving. Usually, what's been so impressive about them, the Vikings will have big leads, but then usually we'll give them up and teams come back, and it's just, you have to sweat it out. Detroit all year has pretty much just stopped everybody and never given them much life. The Bears was one of the first cases where a team really clawed their way back after being down big. And they did that to Green Bay earlier in the year when they had that 17-0 second quarter, and it was pretty much over at that point. So I want to see early, is the Green Bay defense going to show me any signs of life? Because I thought Detroit just marched up and down the field on them the first time. And I think we'll see in the first quarter whether or not Green Bay's awake for this one, because I expect Detroit to come out. You're right, Jack. The place will be on fire. And if the Packer defense just gets mauled, Jordan Love and co can hang with everybody, but it's tough on the road. So this is a Green Bay defense needs to show up. They need to be here for this one. And if they are, we're in for a hell of a game. So
I think the state of Wisconsin is about to flood with a bunch of tears this weekend.
I hope not. I hope they I would love. How much fun would it be if Detroit dropped this and we have a 3-team race for possibly the 1 seed?
When Jordan Love sees Eminem in the box and the crowd going nuts, he's
Philadelphia is pretty light scheduled the rest of the way, right? It's just they have at the Commanders and Pittsburgh.
It's at the Commanders, and then the rest of their games are at home. They've got the Panthers, Pittsburgh, the Cowboys, and the Giants.
Oh man! So,
but one of those teams is a bit better than the others.
I would agree with you.
No, Pittsburgh is legit. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, you must admit, Jack, that's a very easy schedule if you're Philadelphia compared to what the Lions have to do.
Oh, no.
Right? They have to host the Packers. They have to host Buffalo. They've got to go to San Francisco and then top that off with going to Chicago and hosting the Vikings.
Yes, much easier. We're also not going to be.
Philly's going to be the 1
Philly's
seed.
going to beat us. We're not going to beat Philly.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens here. So let's real quick do our game picks. Although I feel like you guys have actually, I'm not sure if I'm totally convinced of where Ziggy's going to go, but Jack, why don't you tell us what you're expecting?
I got 31-13 Detroit. They feed off the crowd early, foot on the gas early, and don't look back. They pick off Jordan Love a couple times. Laporte is finally back from the dead now. 2 Saquon Barkleys. I got Detroit pretty big, 31-13.
I've got Packers 24, Lions 19. I think that the Packers defense is going to be able to get it done and hold Detroit down. I've been really impressed with their run defense over the past few weeks. I'm taking the under in this game, but I think that Jordan Love and the Packers are going to be able to get just enough done to eke out a win in Detroit, steal this one. I think we're going to see 1 or 2 Jordan Love drives where you say, wow, I understand why this guy is one of the highest paid quarterbacks in NFL history. And that'll be enough for Detroit. The division will open up. And the only reason I doubt whether or not this will happen is because it would be good for the Vikings. So that on its own is a reason to think it won't happen. But maybe, just maybe, Jordan Love and Green Bay can get it done in Detroit.
So here's where I'm going. My gut is telling me that the Packers are going to find a way to win this one. Like, I have a gut feeling about it. So I'm going to fade myself and go with what my head's telling me. And I'm going to pick the Lions to win 27-24 is my game pick for this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun up and down the field. Couple big turnovers, hopefully. Hopefully we just get a great Thursday night football game. But I'm going to go with Detroit. And like this is the one to them. If they win this, I feel pretty comfortable about that. I guess they have Buffalo right after, so they do have a tough slate. But this is, I think, as well as Ziggy, the toughest test the rest of the year that they'll have.
This is if the Packers win, I'm gonna get with Paul on air.
If the Lions lose this one, I'm just gonna that kind of went in one ear out the other. If the Lions lose this one, I can't the following week with the Buffalo game, like things could get really really fun, very interesting in the NFC North really quick. And it starts with the win here for the Packers. I should really just pick them. No, I'm gonna pick the Lions. 27-24. All right. We appreciate you guys for
Before we
tuning in.
wrap up, can I get one question in?
Please.
So, Jack, we've had a certain user whose name I'm not sure I can read on the channel ask that you come in dressed up in a wig and a clown nose. And you said in the text messages in our group chat earlier this weekend that if the Packers go into Detroit and win, you're willing to do that.
Yes.
You want to hold yourself to that?
I will hold myself to that. If the Packers
You'll be a clown.
win,
You don't need full makeup or anything, just a little red nose, a little clown wig.
Yes. If the Packers beat the Lions in Detroit Thursday night, I will show up with a little clown nose and a little wig.
Oh, baby.
100%.
All right. The stakes. There are stakes.
And I know exactly the user that you're talking about, too.
Okay, we'll be back. Actually, we're about to record our full recap to Week 13. Get Jack and Ziggy's takes, Jack's takes on the games. We'll have our power rankings coming out. See you soon.